I'm really excited to be here today with Theo Lau. Theo is the former Director of Market Innovation at AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons, and is now the founder of Unconventional Ventures. We're going to have a talk today about how financial services can address the needs of older folks and what Theo is up to. So, Theo, you and I have spoken a few times before, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you. As I understand it, you're really interested in understanding how financial services can change to meet the needs and wants of folks as they get older. Tell me about that mission, and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to get there.
Okay, sure. So thank you for having me here, and welcome to all of you who braved the snow. So I actually started out in telecom, in IT. So that's my background for over 20 years. And then whatever luck brought me to startup world. I started working in a health tech company, and the next thing you know, I started doing work in AARP. So for the most part, the work is, like you said, around the needs and wants of people as they get older. It is a slightly different message if you think about fintech developments for the last few years. It's all focused on millennials. It's all focused on, let's help people start building wealth. And our message is a little bit different. It's more like, that population over there, the 110 million people in the US and growing with 30-something trillion dollars of wealth. It's an interesting market to focus on because they have the assets, but as we're living longer, the needs are getting more and more complex. And, let's say a person 60-something-year-old today, most likely they will still be working for a little while longer. And even when they quote-unquote retire, they will likely still be working part-time or having a second career and whatnot. And they'll be living until 100. So you think about the amount of time that you have. What do I do? Do I know how much I can afford to spend on a daily basis? How do I draw down my assets? What's the best way to do it so I can take advantage of what I have and not to, end up in a bad situation in the later years of your life? So that's what I've been focusing on. And throughout the time, the last few years, I've noticed working with startups and working with VCs in the Valley and whatnot, as you all know, there weren't too many women. There was not much diversity to begin with. I remember hosting a lunch and there were 30-something gentlemen there, all in suits, and I was the only woman there. It was a little bit intimidating. And so, I started focusing more on how can we bring out the voice of the rest of the people in the society, right? How can we elevate the bright minds that are not just in the coastal areas, but also the ones that are in the middle of the country. And so, I did a lot of work around that.
Great, great. Well, I think that's a nice segue into, my first question is really, which is, you were at AARP and now you founded Unconventional Ventures. What is that? What's the thesis of this venture project? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, so it's a similar theme, right? But mostly I want to focus on working with financial institutions, working with startup founders, helping create an ecosystem and connecting them together. Because if you look at a lot of startup founders, they need two things, right? They need distribution channel and they need money. And so I also have, an ecosystem of VCs and FIs who are eager and willing to work with founders. And so I do a lot of the connections. I also want to be able to bring, some of the insights and ideas into helping banks reimagine focusing on the needs of consumers, not just focusing on one particular demographic, but also expanding it to surface a bigger economy.
Yeah. And so along that note of servicing that bigger economy, there's so many people in this room who are either going to build the future of financial services, the young folks in the audience, or the people who are actively building it now, the executives and startup entrepreneurs. What would you tell those folks in how they can work to make finance more inclusive? Like, how can they identify these trends and pivot their companies to address these needs?
Yeah, so I like the whole idea of design thinking, of thinking about the needs of the extreme. And a good example I always use is iPhone, right? iPhone didn't start out creating something for a particular generation or a particular demographic, but more so, how do we reimagine the experience of using a phone as a communication device and go beyond that? So it's the same thing with technologies such as AI. It's so much hype around AI nowadays, but it's not so much thinking about can we use AI for a particular generation, but more so how can we leverage it as a tool to help us manage our finances better. So an example I like to use a lot is a startup company I really like, Puffin in New York. They use AI in financial planning but they look at it from a life stage perspective. So you could be a younger generation looking at, I want to start a family, I want to have a child, I want to buy a house, to you can be someone in the middle of, a sandwich generation like me. I have kids, I have parents. How do I manage the finances amongst 3 households? All the way to the older generation. I'm getting ready to retire. Can I afford a second home? Can I afford to retire? What do I own? What do I owe? And all of those questions. So I like solutions like that. Let us use technology as a means for good. Let us use that to try to create solutions that address a real problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the interesting thing is, you seem to pick out life events or goals more so than a particular age that you're at, because as you said, when you retire might change, or what retirement even looks like in terms of working or not working is going to change. So it's much more goals and events focused. Mm-hmm. Maybe I think that is a good way for you to speak to the young people in this audience. What would you say to them about planning for a financial future? In which that kind of planning might be more goals or events based than I need to have this much by 30, this much by 40, this much by 50.
Yeah. I think, you can pick any person, out there. I have a good friend of mine, he is 50 mm-hmm. and he just had a young baby. Whereas, you have a lot of 50-year-olds that already have, kids in college, right? So age isn't really as much a good of a determinant rather than the life stage you're in, what is going through, right? What are you trying to do? So that's important. I was brought up in a family with, dual working parents. My mom worked, my dad worked. I was brought up in a way that, when my mom is busy working, my dad would make dinner, right? And so vice versa. So the culture I was brought up in, and that was in Hong Kong many, many years ago, that there is equality. It's okay for, husband and wife to switch our roles. It's okay for both people to contribute, right? So it's like, be fearless, chase after your dream. It's okay, you can't have it all. But I think looking back, I'm gonna sound really old in here. It wasn't, I think it made it sound so much easier than it is, right? It's, looking back at the 20-something years I've been working, I was brought up to believe that you can have it all. You can have a family, you can have a career, you can have children. It is hard. It is really, really hard. Like, use the example of me being able to come up here to spend an hour with you. I left the house at 6:30. I had to have neighbors came in to watch my 2 little kids at home who were just waking up and having breakfast. I had to have another set of neighbors come over and pick them up to bring to the house because school's canceled. It's snow day. And then I'm gonna have to beg and pray that, DC airport is still open so I can get home so I can actually fetch my kids at night so I can bring them to bed. It is not easy. It's, it's not, it goes beyond, we need to lean in. We need to, grab every single opportunity. You can only do so much if there's actually a wall for you to lean. If there's nothing, it's a little hard, right? So, it takes a village, and we always say that. It takes a whole village. It takes a partner who's there, who can be there for you. It takes neighbors. It takes babysitters. I have 3 of them. And it takes, employers to be willing to give you the chance. It takes them to be willing to take you back after you have a child. Because having a child doesn't make you stupider, it doesn't make you dumb, but a lot of people think that, right? They're like, well, I'm not sure. Can you actually come back to work because you have a kid? Well, no one asked the father that. Can you actually come back to work because you have a child, right? So it takes cultural change. It takes a lot of people pitching in to make it work. So it goes well beyond just having equal pay.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I think those all, that makes so much sense. And I think, a great way to dovetail off of that is, there are lots of folks in here who are, either going to be starting careers, and so they'll need to look for companies that will align with their goals, or a lot of the folks here are managers and will be making mm-hmm. decisions along the lines of, hey, my employee is going to leave for this amount of time, like, how can I prepare our team so that they can come back? How can, entrepreneurs at a startup or executives at a company, how can they build a culture that is inclusive in that way? How can they be accepting, and how can they adapt to those changes?
needs to be understanding, open and honest understanding. It takes a lot. You need more senior people in leadership roles. You need more women in boards. You need, simple things like have a returnship program. Some of the companies started doing that the last few years, and I love it. Give women a chance. I would argue that after you have a child, you actually end up becoming smarter because you have to juggle everything. You have a little thing in you for 9 months. It's not easy. And then you have the little thing who doesn't communicate and cries, and you have to mind read. It's actually a whole lot more that goes into it, raising a child, than it is trying to babysit your executives, right? So, returnship program, and just be supportive. And also, things like don't do so many happy hours after work. Do something at lunch. Moms need to go home. Dads need to go home, right? Parental leave. It takes understanding
my
that.
boss is listening.
Oh. I was talking to him earlier. It takes balancing. It needs both partners to be there, right? So it's not just leaning on the mom, because we all have work, and then you don't want to be going home and then do all the quote unquote unpaid work of taking care of your child. Your partner needs to be there.
Great, great. So that was my last question. I'd love to open it up to the audience if anyone has any questions for Theo. Or if there's things that you'd like for her to talk about, just throw topics or crickets.
Hello? Yeah, there we go. As you were growing up, did you see that for yourself? Like, did you want a career? Did you want kids? Or did you just always kind of have the thought of, I want a career first, and then kids came after? What was kind of your goal as you were growing up?
I actually thought I would never have a kid. Yeah, that didn't come into my mind. I had my first one when I was 36, so I was late. And then I had my second one much later. No, I'm not 25. but no, it just sort of came. I think what was interesting was, I still remember this. I didn't want to have a child. I thought, oh my God, that's like so much work. Why do I want to pay money so I can have this little thing? So I spent more money on raising, and I was me. And then I remember I was on a project. I burned out. It took 3 years of me trying to implement something, and it did. And it was a good project, but it was a 100-hour week, round the clock. It was brutal. And after I got done, I'm like, there's got to be something else I can do other than just building systems. I built systems for 20 years. I want to build something else. So that was that.
That's great. Mm-hmm. Great.
What I learned is a plan is made to be changed. Yeah.
Any other questions? So, there's a topic that's personally close to me, and I imagine be close to a lot of the students here. Student loans. It's obviously a huge personal and societal problem. What can the people in this room and fintech and financial technology, how can we address that problem?
I think the one thing to know about student loan is that it's not just a problem for millennials. It's a problem that impacts all generations. Even the generation that we've been focused on, because a lot of the times the older adults, they take out loans either for themselves, they went back to school, or they take out loans for their kids or grandkids. And so it is a big problem. I don't know if there's an easy solve from just a private sector perspective, unfortunately. I think this is a big enough problem that will need public and private support. But first of all, is understanding the problem is not just one particular demographic.
Great, I think that's a great insight. All right, I think that's all the time we have. Everyone give it up for Theo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.